Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. My guest today is Matt Lewis, and he is the Global Chief Artificial and Augmented Intelligence Officer at Inizio Medical. Yes, Matt is super smart. And this was an amazing conversation. We talk about the future of medical affairs into 2030. So great conversation. I hope you guys enjoy it. Don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't already. Check us out on MSL Talk Live, which is typically the first Tuesday of every month at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, and it does vary. And check out our YouTube videos. Everything goes up on YouTube. So thanks, guys. I hope you really like this. Welcome to MSL Talk with Tom Caravela, a podcast specifically designed for MSLs and all things field medical. Hey, Matt, welcome to the podcast. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Tom, thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited. This is an awesome topic. And guys, just so you know, Matt came up with this. He and I have done stuff in the past, and I think this is just an amazing topic. We're going to talk about imagining the future of medical affairs, like down the road. So, but before we get into that, Matt, why don't you do an introduction, and then we'll get into the meat of it.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's great. So my name is Matt Lewis. I lead medical analytics and innovation at Inizio Medical. I've been in medical affairs for 22 years. I've been in life sciences for 25 years. I was a medical liaison in April of 22 through about three years after that or so. Was in medical in-house for about 8, 9, 10 years after that. Did pretty much every role you could do in the 2000s. Did CME, did publications, investigator-initiated studies, ran advisory boards, key opinion leaders, global opinion leaders, you name it, I did it. And then I transitioned out of kind of in-house medical affairs into consulting and agency life, and ran SciComm and publications and kind of no-go product strategy for a while, and then moved into a role that I kind of created, which is a data and analytics position about 7 years ago, leveraging artificial intelligence and advanced analytics and software as a service to kind of drive change and create value across the medical affairs continuum.
And guys, seriously, like, this guy's done it all. Like he kind of said it, but like I've seen some of his work. I mean, this guy is legit. He's done so much. So he is incredibly more than an expert in this space. So this is a perfect topic for him. And he comes to us from, he said, he's with Inizio, which is also you're familiar with Ashfield Engage, which is a partner of ours. So this episode is actually sponsored by Inizio. They are a company that specializes in the commercialization and strategic engagement for the healthcare industry, delivering solutions to meet the needs of patients, providers, payers, pharmaceutical companies, all to improve the treatment experience and outcomes. So Ashfield Engage and Inizio create personalized, impactful experience and deliver average of 5 million engagements annually across all healthcare stakeholders. So these guys are legit. Truly happy to be partnering with them. So Matt, let's get into it, man. The one thing I want to start with is that when we were talking, you mentioned the word digital thinking. So I want to start with that because I think it's a great way to look at the future and what's ahead. So can you describe what that means?
Yeah, sure. So, it is one of these things that has been talked about and in all of the kind of competency manuals, the considerations of the major groups like Life Sciences Training and Educators Network, L10, that, many folks probably listening to the show or are part of or listen to, affiliated with, or like MAPS, the Medical Affairs Professional Society, ISMAP, all kind of talk about having a skill set or a disposition or an understanding of things like data, analytics, digital. And like, that's really important. Like it is really useful and relevant to think about like the parts of our world that are related to software and to technology and to emerging considerations like the metaverse and augmented intelligence and all the rest, omnichannel, all crucial and critical. And we definitely need to know about those topics for sure. But that's not really what I'm talking about when I talk about digital thinking. Digital thinking is more around like the digital kind of fluency or the digital competencies, if you will, that allow us as people, as humans, to work well with what might be called the machines, if you will. So like it's that kind of that interaction that we have that allows us to be better than we otherwise could be by working in combination or by augmenting our capabilities in alignment with, say, artificial intelligence, or with extending our capabilities with like mobile devices or with other things that might be on the horizon. And this hasn't really been a focus historically, because honestly, the computing power and the ability of the machines hasn't really been that strong. It's been pretty weak for most of recorded time. So when you tried to do a lot of this stuff like in years past, you wouldn't get great results. So, for the most part, like people would try to use like, text mining or natural language processing or lots of other things, and they wouldn't really see like outsized effects because the computing power was somewhat limited. Or like, you'd go on like Amazon or like on Netflix or, and you'd see like the things you wanted, like a better book or the next show based upon the show you just watched. And it would have all the AI stuff would happen kind of in the background. And you wouldn't even know it was AI because it was just kind of hidden to you. It would be happening without your knowledge. But now, like the power of these things is coming to the point where they're really palpable and they're conspicuous and you can see them and they're really having an impact on our lives, and how we kind of navigate through that and how we work with it is really going to be a key kind of factor that determines our success, and not just our success, like as, say, field-based medical liaisons, if you will, but also our success in professional roles, our success in our personal lives, our success in pretty much, our interactions with the world at large. And it all comes back to this like consideration of digital thinking, or kind of like how we interact with the machines.
Yeah. This is fascinating, and I'm a novice in a lot of this stuff, but I can tell you from it's obviously conference season. You mentioned MAPS, and just got back from Mass East, and there's all these conferences going on. This is the hot topic. You just hit the nail on the head. You mentioned, omnichannel and AI and DOLs and all that stuff. So like what, and I want to unpack that a little bit and talk a little more in specifics as to what companies are doing. But before we do that, what happens if companies don't? I know that companies are starting to adopt this. What do you think happens if they really don't adopt this and they wait too long to be digital thinkers?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really possible for their systems not to evolve, because it's kind of like this wave, if you will, like almost like you think about like this big wave out in the ocean that's kind of gathering steam and rolling towards the shore. And that wave of digital innovation is like coming closer and closer. And eventually it's just going to wash over everything. And so it's going to wash over all of our systems. It's going to wash over all of our software. Like, so if you're at like a large pharmaceutical company, or even at a biotech or a digital therapeutics firm or a med device company or insurance company or hospital, eventually by the end of 2023, most of your enterprise systems are going to be washed over by generative AI, by what, say ChatGPT or something similar to that. And so it's not going to be really a choice whether you kind of opt in or not. It's just going to happen. Like you'll see by the end of this year that Microsoft products will have a generative AI component to them. The choice might be whether or not your staff chooses to use that component, because I mean, there have been AI features in things like PowerPoint and Word for a while, and many people don't even use them. They just sit there in the background doing the same things they did for the last 10 years, but they don't opt in for those features. But the systems, the software still have those components, but the people that are using them don't change their habits. They don't change their workflow. But the systems will all evolve rapidly within the next couple of months. You're already starting to see this across many big organizations. But it is going to be that kind of choice, I think, for individuals and leaders as to how they adapt and evolve and transform their groups, both in terms of people, in terms of whether they think about thinking, whether they think about that way they think and how they think, as well as how they think about what they do and what, how they add value. Are there certain parts of the business that are kind of annoying or kind of mundane, or just that there's not fun to do as people? Like they're typically sometimes like you do the same thing so often you almost forget that the things that are frustrating or annoying to do are even annoying because you're so used to doing them.
Yeah,
like you get into a habit that you just kind of that's just the thing you do.
that's how you do it.
You just how you do it. But like when you find that there's like a kind of frictionless, smooth, easy way to do it, and it's fast and effective, and it can save you time, and you can use that time to go take a walk or listen to a podcast or listen to some music or go talk to a friend in the time you saved, and you can be more productive as a result of that. It's magic.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, and I like the way you put it. Like, Pete, it's not an opt-in thing. It's happening. So you need to adopt it, or you're out. And it almost reminds me of, like, I hate to use this analogy, but it's like, my mom never wanted to give up her flip phone. She never wanted to get the smartphone. She didn't think she needed it. Her flip phone worked fine. She could make calls. It gets to a point where you go to the Verizon store or whatever, to get your phone, and they're like, no, we don't have a flip phone anymore. You have to have a smartphone. You have to adopt the smartphone. Like, that's where we're at.
Definitely. It's an excellent analogy. It's that I've heard, senior leaders in the enterprise AI business use that analogy actually for this. It's an excellent way of describing it, because before the iPhone, I'm in that era. Like, I used the Motorola flip phone, the old flip phone, not the current smartphone flip phone, but the old Motorola flip phone, Razor phone. Yeah, before the iPhone came out. But it wasn't that helpful. It was kind of annoying, and like, it wasn't easy to use, wasn't easy to call. It only called. It didn't do anything else. So didn't really change my life. It was just like, okay, if I had to make a call every once in a while, it was in my pocket. But when the smartphone came out, when the iPhone came out, it really did change the world. It changed, the world of technology, but accessibility, in some ways good, in terms of things we could do, and in some ways maybe not so good in terms of social media and the harms for our youth and all the rest. But it did transform society tremendously, and we're at that kind of iPhone moment for artificial intelligence right now, where AI has been around for 20, 40, 60 years. But it's now at that point where, as a consideration by society, it's really becoming visible and also starting to shift into public consciousness, and it will likely change everything within the next couple of months and years.
Yeah. And sticking with this smartphone analogy, if you watch enough like TikTok or Instagram reels and videos, you'll see that there are, I don't know, I always wind up getting these on my feed, but you see these iPhone hacks. Like, the iPhone itself does so much that the average user doesn't probably get to past 40% of what maybe less, maybe 30% of what the capabilities are as a user. So when I look at what's going on and what you're saying as far as this digital planet that we're living on, and how it relates to medical affairs, what are companies doing right now? What practical applications? Because if companies are only using 30% or 20% right now, what exactly are they, the early adopters of it? What are they doing, and what should they be doing in the future?
Yeah, right now I think there's a lot of, discussion, a lot of planning, and a lot of, what might be called like active research. I'll say, like, when I was studying electrobiology as an undergrad, my professors always used to say that, like, when you don't know a lot about a topic, you call it an area of active research, which was a nice way of saying we don't know what that is. Like, when I was studying electrobiology in school, there was the big thing was G protein coupled receptors, and they were quite hot in the late 90s. But now they're also quite hot because they're yielding a lot of active drug programs. But 25, 30 years ago, they were just discovered. So it was an area of active research. No one knew kind of how to use them or why they were becoming helpful. It's kind of like that in the AI space now. That seems like they might be really helpful in a lot of ways, but no one really knows because it's so new that, it's very experimental in most places. And I think when people sense that kind of, that palpable kind of interest, they react in kind of fairly kind of typical human ways. Like, some folks are really interested and they go out and experiment a tremendous amount. I'm one of those people. Other people, kind of run as far away from that experimentation or innovation as possible, and you kind of keep away from experimenting. And then there's a lot of kind of in-between considerations, like around governance and compliance and security and privacy and all the rest. And that's important. We need to kind of go through that consideration path before we kind of find our way to the other side. But I don't think there's a tremendous amount of, real scalable use cases yet, because we're only 6 months in on the generative side, at least. Some of these other considerations around omnichannel and the metaverse are certainly a little bit longer. But on the generative side, it just hasn't happened long enough yet to see much traction. But I think, a lot of groups have, put out, say, for example, like prohibitions or protocols saying, hey, if you're a current employee of a large pharmaceutical company, don't take our internal data, like our data from our studies or from our patients or from investigators. Don't put that into ChatGPT and ask questions of our data in that tool, because they don't want the data to go back to Microsoft and OpenAI, and then you have it be used to train the model that other people might then ask questions of, say, like a direct competitor. Say you're at AstraZeneca, you put information in about breast cancer, and then Gilead has access to the information at a later point. And like they're appropriately concerned about that potential use. So it's easier just to kind of throttle the usage and just say, hey, everyone, don't do, bad things, and just don't use the system that way. And a lot of companies, both within pharma as well as in large corporations like Samsung and the rest, have those prohibitions in place now. But in addition to that, it's kind of like a block and bifurcate type of model where they're blocking the systems for the average person, but then separately on the bifurcation side, they're actively experimenting with interested, innovative parties, groups that are high and deep into the tech stack, that know a lot about artificial intelligence, that know about innovation, that are experimenting in kind of closed models, that can say like, hey, for this specific use case, which is really of interest to us, how can we make this, work better? How can we make it work faster? How can we make it, more impactful for patients? How do we move it to a place where we can scale it across the enterprise? So it's not like they're saying, hey, we don't believe that this is valuable. No, they're not saying that. They just don't want to create risk for the business. So it might be, we don't want our 20,000 employees each individually wasting time trying to figure out what works. We're going to just focus it on this one kind of innovation team and see how it progresses forward. And then if it works, we'll scale it. And I think that's prudent. That makes sense.
That makes total sense, because there is, the way you put it, there is a lot of risk involved. You can let the cat out of the bag and you could share really sensitive information, not realizing that you're just teaching, the powers that be out there, the machine, some of the inner workings of what it is. It's like you're giving away the secret sauce if you're not careful. So
yeah, it's also like it's a really deep hole. It's not like, even with like, I remember when Google first came out, and and there were some search engines, to your point about the flip phone, that were available before Google, but they weren't that great. So it's like you're on Ask Jeeves or like Expedia or Yahoo, whatever existed pre-Google. It was like, okay, but you don't really get what you're looking for. And it's like, I'm going to go do something else now with my time. But then when you're on Google, and it's like, oh my God, wow, this is like exactly what I was looking for. And you kind of just got used to, the list of 10 results on Google being the answer, but you still had to do a lot of work to get what you needed. Now within generative, it's just not like that. And it's beyond helpful. It's like, it's helpful. And it also kind of makes you like think about what role you might have in the future as this really gets to a real product. Because I think a lot of people even forget the fact that ChatGPT, as such as it is out in the world, is actually not a product. It's just a beta. It's just a research release that OpenAI sent out to kind of say, hey, is this something that people might find palatable, it might find interesting? And then the real product is still forthcoming. Like there is a paid service that's out there now that's, GPT-4, but the real product is still kind of downstream, coming out later this year. So like, if you get a sense even just of the free beta and what it's capable of, and to think that there's something more powerful and kind of really real, if you will, that's coming later, it's amazing and also horrifying at the same time.
I was going to say, it's almost scary though.
It is almost
I've
scary.
used ChatGPT and just for what it can do now, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
So, it's certainly, like you said, it's definitely here. I think it's something that, people just have to figure out what's the best application for their company, their division, their organization, their MSLs, whatever it might be. Now, let me ask you this. You had said when we talked, you mentioned the word or the term curated forecasts, which I think you meant like predictions of what you see in the future. Could you share some of those with us? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, this is one of those things that is a kind of a known, if you will, about generative, but that unless you're like close to it, you may not appreciate, because it's not obvious. So like generative and ChatGPT specifically, it's not a database, it's not a spreadsheet. It's not a language model. It's not even like search where like it's retrieving things that exist and then surfacing them to you. It really is a prediction engine. And, your brain is a prediction engine as well. And the human brain is a wonderful prediction engine, but it's not perfect. And no one's brain, including my own, is nowhere close to perfect. So it's helpful, I think, to have like a companion or to have a, Microsoft would call it a co-pilot. I don't really love that co-pilot term, but it's a useful analogy. And there are a lot of things, if you have to make a decision, say as a medical liaison or in my role or any other role, that to have a thought partner, to have someone to kind of bounce ideas off of, anyone, including ChatGPT, I find useful. And I've had many roles in medical affairs. If I'd had ChatGPT in many of those roles, I could have imagined myself being significantly more effective, productive, happy, and enjoyed my role and been much less frustrated than if I had it now. And that's just with the open access 3.5 version, let alone what it's going to be capable of within the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. I mean, I could tell you, like when I was in MSL and I had all of New York State and all of New Jersey as my territory, I would stay up, I'm not joking, literally from like 10 o'clock at night until like 1 o'clock in the morning, mapping out my routes that I would take because there was no GPS at the time. I had these Hagstrom's atlases and like, Sharpie pens that I would kind of like the erasable Sharpies. And I would like draw out like where I would park my car so I could walk to my key opinion leaders' offices and see them and then go without losing time at the meter and drive to Brooklyn, drive to Queens, drive into the city. And I literally would spend like 3 hours a night, every night before my calls, just kind of mapping out my calls, kind of practicing in my head what I would say on each call, what questions I would respond to and whatnot. That entire process could now be collapsed into like a 1-minute synopsis that would be generative produced. I can't get that time back in my life, but now hopefully people in the future can use it as a springboard to what comes. But that's just a small, tiny, useless fraction of what's possible. But the engine is a predictive engine, so you can use it for really any thought prediction, not just content, but really any prediction. So, like for example, if you're it's still a little bit limited in the open version, but you'll see in the future some other kind of forms of this emerge. But like say you're a field medical person and you're talking to a community opinion leader that you haven't worked with historically before that has a query on a particular topic, and you're used to talking only to academic experts, say like in lung cancer. You could ask your generative platform, whether it's an in-house tool or a specific design tool, and these things will emerge, I imagine, in the next couple of months. You could ask it to not just to surface the types of queries that you might get, which it can definitely do, but you could all, which is amazing by itself, but you could also ask it to take on the stance, the disposition, the tone, the role, the character, the style, the background, the patient demographics, the whole kind of personality of the person you're about to see before you've ever seen them, and have them take on, say, an antagonistic perspective or a supportive perspective or switch between them, so that as you go through the discussion in this kind of virtual environment, you can kind of role play with the machine, if you will, and become more confident, more self-efficacious pre-visit, and then be prepared for a conversation that actually never took place, and then go into the room and go be like a rock star. If I had the ability to do that when I was a medical liaison 20 years ago, I would have, first of all, I would have felt much more confident about myself. I would have felt like I could do anything. And I probably would have enjoyed the work a lot better because I would have not known what the uncertainties were, because I would have played them all out of my head before I went there. But I mean, that's just the beginning. That this is all possible today.
These are amazing examples, by the way. I mean, I love the way you're spelling this out, because just from a research perspective, being able to get advice, it's like, ChatGPT and these artificial development platforms that are being created. It's like being able to go to somebody for advice. So yes, you're curating all of the details that you might need to help you in that situation. Believe me, I've used it. I see what it's capable of. What do you say to the naysayers out there that are because there's a lot of people that are just anti-AI and anti-digital and fight. Now, I know you talked about the tsunami and the wave, and I get that. I'm talking about the naysayers as it relates to the human element, the nuance that has to continue to exist in order to specifically make the MSL effective and not get too caught up in what would be considered artificial?
Yeah, I mean, I've always had the perspective on this topic that the thing that's artificial about artificial intelligence is not that it's fake, but that it's a different perspective, and that the way that artificial intelligence thinks, if you will, is that it thinks in a way that we don't expect. That's very, very kind of strange and kind of uncommon for a human to kind of anticipate, and that's wonderful for medical affairs and just brilliant for the work we do, because it tends to be in a lot of our worlds, you get into these like little bubbles, these like little insular kind of discussion groups where people have the same ideas over and over again. And if you get a different way of thinking about something, that's really helpful, because it can challenge your assumptions and get you to think in a different way that ends up providing value to opinion leaders or to other stakeholders or investigators. And ultimately that adds utility for patients. And that's what we're all about. I think we're trying to help the lives of people that are suffering from disease. And if we can do that better, faster, stronger, with more effect, I think that's why we're all here. I mean, I don't think it's if someone kind of just like stumbled upon like a AI, kind of in the desert, it just kind of came from nowhere, and it was like a product from no kind of sense of origin, then I'd probably be a little bit concerned. But AI it's a human invention, so it's not fake, it's not kind of synthetic in the sense that it's not like real. It's a human invention like anything else, and it's no less human than anything else we do. It just happens to be kind of providing a perspective that one individual human isn't offering. It's like kind of the synthesis of our human corpus of knowledge, presented in the form we requested of. And the other kind of piece of that is I don't think still at this point in time that we're capable of kind of providing value without kind of adding the human voice. So I think really that the real kind of focus is trying to blend the artificial intelligence with the human perspective into what we call augmented intelligence. And if AI and human, the 1 + 1 = 3, that's really where the value is. It's the AI plus the human, 1 + 1 = 3 together. Whereas like in all of recorded history, like since the dawn of time, humans have used some type of technology like fire or the wheel or the steam engine or electricity to do things that we couldn't do, to like replace human work. But now for the first time ever, we have the ability to use AI to do more than we could do, not to just replace human work, but to extend or to enhance or to amplify or augment our capabilities. And that's really exciting, because it could allow us to do things that we actually want to do and take some of the things we don't want to do away, which is great. And then hopefully also make the world a better place. And it's not just medical. I mean, I think there's a huge benefit for medical, but there are a lot of other really cool things that I think are neat as a result of what's possible from augmented intelligence. But we're just right at the dawn of that kind of time. So it's hard to know what's coming, but I think that's...
Yeah, I see it seeping into everything. I mean, it's every aspect of life. So yeah, I don't think it's just, obviously, I think it's going to be all facets. But let me ask you this. So we had talked about, or the title of this is, looking into the future of medical affairs to 2030. So 2030 is obviously 7 years from now, right? So let's think about, do you think that MSLs specifically should be nervous at all? Is there a chance that there are less jobs available in 7 years from now for MSLs because of artificial intelligence? And should people be scared? Or is that just, no, don't worry about that. Just realize that this is there to help the job, not replace it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like making like kind of all or nothing predictions, because one, I don't have a crystal ball, and two, no one really knows what the future holds. I kind of joke about that crystal ball thing, because actually I do have a crystal ball on the other side of my office over there, but it's not a real crystal ball. A friend gave it to me, and every time I say I don't have a crystal ball, my 8-year-old reminds me I do actually have a crystal ball. So I don't have a working crystal ball, I should say. But I mean, I think this is a topic, and I've seen this in all kind of walks of life, whether it's in retail or finance or defense or telecoms or pharma. everyone's interested. Like there's really no sector that's untouched by artificial intelligence. And you don't really find many people that are kind of just uninterested or like agnostic. There are people, as you mentioned earlier, that are really antagonistic, and then there are really people that are protagonistic, but you don't find a lot of people that are just whatever. So I think that fact that there's like a huge amount of interest is indicative that something is happening, if you will. What that is that's happening, I'm not really quite sure, but it's still early. So I think that's fair. I think if a role is likely to kind of be helpful in kind of what's to come, I think the medical science liaison role is definitely high amongst those that will benefit from what's happening. Although what it'll look like 3, 5, 7 years from now is still kind of hard to imagine. But I do think that the skill set and the overall disposition lends itself very well to kind of what's at issue. Because if you can master a subject matter, whether it's lung cancer or heart failure or Huntington's disease or really anything that medical liaisons are responsible for quickly and well, and be able to explain it simply to a complex audience, which is essentially what field medical teams do, and then architect complex projects in support of it and liaise with many different stakeholders on an ongoing basis and manage your time and manage your resources and manage other competing priorities, those skill sets are integral to what will come next. Now, it may not be that the subject matters that people need to have responsibility for will be the same exact things in the future. They may shift from being, say, therapeutic area subject matters to more digital subject matters, possibly. But, it's the same underlying skill set without a doubt. And to be able to kind of have that transfer learning to kind of take one and kind of apply it to the other is definitely going to be relevant. I do also think that this role of kind of field medical as orchestrator for omnichannel is going to become more and more relevant in the days to come, because as artificial intelligence kind of makes it easier to get content out to folks and summarize it for people so they can digest complex content and kind of understand what it means, because there's just too much medical science. It's like it's growing too quickly, and it's hard for the average doctor to understand how fast things are changing. There's just too much material. It was the case when I was a medical liaison 20 years ago, and it's no less busy or volumetric now than it was then. But now we have AI, and AI can summarize most things quite quickly in a format people can understand. So you can imagine over the next couple of years that as the kind of the digital content supply chain, which is all the content we need to get out to people, flattens a bit and people can digest it, someone that can orchestrate which content goes to what person in a way that adds value, like a field medical person, for example, will become much more important than it's ever been. And to be able to personalize it so that, what goes to Dr. X versus Dr. Y versus Dr. A in community versus academic versus ivory tower versus rank and file will be extremely relevant in the future when those systems kind of catch up with the theory, if you will. And I think that those days are soon upon us. They're approaching rapidly.
Well, I'm going to translate and just give throw my 2 cents in. I think you're all safe. MSL's out there. You guys are safe. You're not going to be replaced. You're too good. You're too smart. And we need that interpersonal touch. So, Matt, this was awesome. I appreciate you coming on. You mentioned the word omnichannel. I'm glad we didn't get into that because I'm actually doing an episode on omnichannel.
Oh, cool.
Next week. So it's going to come out really soon. So let's just a little sneak peek. That'll be like a part 2 to kind of this conversation, although omnichannel is here as well. But this was awesome, dude. I always like chatting with you. I always learn a lot when I speak with you. And this was a great topic for us to cover. So we'll have to do it again. Guys, don't forget to check out Inizio, our sponsor. It's INIZIO. Check them out online. It's a great company. And Matt, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Tom. Much appreciated. Thanks so much.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. See you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the show. And if you enjoyed it, please subscribe so that you don't miss an episode in the future. And feel free to leave a rating or a review or a comment. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you soon.